Hello everyone, and welcome to another casual stroll through Lord of the Rings Online. My name is Matt Elliott. I go by Scenario on the message boards, and I'm a senior world designer on Lord of the Rings Online, and have been doing this for pretty much most of the life of this game, with the exception of the areas we're actually running through right now. I was not working on LOTRO at the time Gondor was being built, so figured we recently had King's Gondor, and we'll continue on our journey through Gondor itself now. Last stream, we kind of made our way through all the way here to Lynn here. This was our intended stopping point. But we covered a lot of ground. And for those of you that have played through King's Gondor, which we can kind of see the map for it here, you're really familiar with, actually I think this is a normal Gondor map, not King's Gondor, but you're familiar with the look and feel of Gondor, but with a fresher take. We're back in the original Gondor areas now to just kind of check it out and see what the world looks like in comparison to the newer version and the post-war version that you've all got to experience recently. For those of you that are new to this stream, this is a world design and level design focused stream. So we're going to be talking about things like what goes into the planning and development and creation of the landscapes of Lord of the Ring Online. This is not a space where we're going to be talking about things like class balance, raid balance, PvMP, lag fixes, any of those things, because those aren't my area of expertise. If you have questions about those things, which is completely fine, I highly recommend checking out the message boards for answers or for posting your questions, or hanging out for other streams with members of our team that can answer those questions for you. So in the meantime, let's jump back into running around original Gondor. Still kind of under the gloom of the dawnless day. I think I'm running a bit too fast. This version of Gondor is the kind of war-torn version. You know, I think in Lynn here in particular, the war has already sort of passed through and made its way beyond, closer towards Peligir, and then eventually heading to Minas Tirith itself. I don't think we'll get to Minas Tirith as part of this. That I believe is considered the old Anorian region. So we're gonna avoid going through old Anorian right now, and instead we're gonna go through the areas of eastern and central Gondor that we haven't had a chance to hit yet. I think after this we'll go into Ithilien and maybe Osgiliath. And then we'll kind of step through all the different versions of Minas Tirith that we've had to explore. Hey, dude, with your torch. Actually, kind of nice having, like, every once in a while you get that pop of light on the landscape that draws your eye to it. We have to, you know, I know I've talked about it before. We always have to be very careful about our use of lighting on landscape, just because we can only have so many light influences on the landscape before things start getting a little unwieldy and rendering poorly, because eventually the engine just kind of starts throwing away light sources, and it's like, oh yeah, we're not gonna use that one, or it causes things to just not light at all if there are too many light sources. So here we are running through Lower Lebanon, the forests up in the north. So this area, when we started working on King's Gondor, this is an area that we were contemplating doing some expansion on as well, because, you know, right behind this waterfall is a pretty immense valley that would have been great for expansion, though we decided to kind of rein things in a little bit and not produce additions to every like mountain valley that we saw, because there were a few in Gondor that were pretty were prime real estate to expand up into, since we wanted to make sure that King's Gondor had something new that this version of Gondor didn't have, so that there'd be something fresh for players. Lost Shire Hobbit asks, are the pink and white trees the same ones as in Arid Luin? They look alike. They are probably the same assets. I would guess that they are the same assets. You know, these I appreciate the look and feel that these trees can bring to a scene, but I think for me, the thing that bothers me the most about them is they are missing like flecks of green in them. You know, when a tree blossoms, when it flowers, it isn't all just that one color. And so it would have been nice to see, you know, these have a little bit more richness to them with just adding a little bit of color to the leaves, or to add in color, because right now these are also just like, they're just the leaves. They're meant to imply flowering trees, but when you get up close and look at them, they're actually just the leaves. I think I've talked before about how like sometimes to build a scene, you need to not worry as much about all the little individual details of like this leaf looking right, that leaf looking right, and rather you want to have assets that are in there that compose the scene in general. And I think these trees are kind of a case of that, where, you know, instead of authoring new versions of trees that were heavily flowered and creating new textures for them, you know, we went a little bit easier. You know, I think at the time we were making these for Arid Lewin, we had a time crunch to like get that round of polish out, and you know, so we opted to just do a color change on them. And again, it goes back to that like mood setting component of the game. So one of the things that I was thinking about too in preparation for the stream was thinking about, you know, particularly Dol Amroth, but many of the other Gondorian cities. I found myself running into this issue of like never really feeling like I was in there long enough to really understand the layout of these cities, you know, to know the thoroughfare. And I remember playing through them the first time, finding them to be very, very daunting places. Ultimately they feel more complex than they actually are. You know, they feel like there's more twists and turns and structure, but really these are just, there's a lot of tall buildings that create this imposing feel, and it gives you have a hard time actually seeing where you're going to be going next because of how tall everything is. And I think that made my initial playthroughs of these areas, like I said, a little daunting. And you know, I think there are some things that could be done to mitigate that. And I also think playing through these areas at the time that they were introduced would also offer up a little bit more time to familiarize myself with them. Like if you were playing the game when Dol Amroth was the end game for Lord of the Rings, you had a lot of time in that city to learn where everything is, to learn, you know, how to move through it, what the fastest routes through it are. But when you're playing the game as these regions are just like leveling stops for you along the way, you don't have as much of an opportunity to really kind of sit down and learn the city. You don't have the opportunity to become as familiar with it as you might have been if you had been in there for a while. So it was just like in my head thinking about it and thinking about how, you know, the player experience of things like, you know, Breetown or Thorin's Hall like could be initially daunting to a player. And then thinking about like, oh, okay, so as we go forward building new towns, new cities, like how can we build things in a way that helps the players learn the city, whether that's through the introduction of, you know, clear signage, through, you know, main paths through. That's actually something that we've been talking about in preparation for the Catacombs of Umbar. Is, you know, how do we want to handle player navigation through that space, both through stables, which our approach for stables in the catacombs is very much going to be akin to, like, you know, you get a tour guide through the Parisian catacombs kind of thing, where there's a dude chilling out there who can help guide you to other portions of the city. And so, like, and I think, you know, part of what we're thinking that we'll do for Update 40 as well is take a look at the overland gameplay of the City of Umbar 2 and see where we can improve traversal through that as well. It's like running through here and just seeing how familiar much of what is here, how familiar all of this feels. It's just darker and gloomier. Talarion says, any specific reason why we can't swim far south here and you hit a you're not supposed to be here region, and in a new region we have a death wall? So I'm guessing you're meaning why you can swim in some areas and you just run into invisible physics versus you run into a death wall. I think it just varies on the design philosophy of the people creating the space. Some people are okay with just having the invisible walls. Others prefer to have, a reason why you can't continue any further. And usually our death walls are that solution. That's our you can't continue any further solution. So talking about cities here, one of the things that I really appreciate about this little town is how, while there are some imposing structures, it's a little bit more open. You can see more of where you're going and where you want to head. It's easier to define landmarks, whereas when you're in the bigger Gondorian cities, everything is a landmark. So it's really hard for you to get that kind of visual landmarking in a space, both because of how big it is and because of how imposing the walls are all around you, making it hard for you to see where you need to go. There is, the landmarking is very important in spaces like this, and I think where Umbar Baharbel is a little bit more successful than something like Minas Tirith or Pelargir is the city itself is not skyscraper highs walls all around everything. Sure, there are the city walls surrounding it, but a lot of the buildings are kind of a little bit lower, and I think that gives us a little bit more opportunity to have things like these towers here peek out a little bit higher so you can kind of set the direction that you want to head. All right. So to follow up on Talarian's question about the water impassables, I think it was by and large just a case of this is how the particular designer implemented it versus other areas. And, for me, anyways, I prefer not to leave gray areas of like where a player could be or where a player shouldn't be. And I tend to lean more heavily on things like death walls and impassables where I feel it's appropriate. Much to the chagrin of many people, I'm sure. And as far as whether or not there might be an extension further south from there, the way we've set up our regioning for the Haradwaith region, if there is any expansion to happen toward further south along the coast from Ithilien, it's more likely to happen in the Haradwaith region than in the Gondor region. Mostly just because it gives us a bit more room and a bit more flexibility to work. Whereas, this region in particular, I think this is region 3, Region 3 and Region 4 are very heavily pockmarked with landscape copies of different places. You know, we have a bajillion copies of Helm's Deep, we have a bajillion copies of Minas Tirith and the Pelennor Fields, and that makes building out in these regions a bit trickier than they ought to be. I think Region 4 is a little bit better for us on that front, at least as long as we are staying south on the southern end of things. But Region 3, I think we're not likely to do much more big expansions in this region just because of spatial constraints, and in terms of like helping the narrative, you know, the region to region narrative flow feel good. You know, I feel like if we did an expansion south, and if we were to do it in another region other than Hardwaith, we'd probably do it in the post-Pelennor region, Mordor Region 4, because that's more likely to be in line with the level breaks that we want to aim for. Not to say that there wouldn't be lower level versions of things that could go in, but I think, you know, those sorts of things we want to be careful about how and where things grow, so that we're not just making poor decisions with how we place landscape now. Because I think we've made enough poor decisions about where we position things in the past. All right. See if there are any other questions before I keep on wandering. Oh, that reminds me. Could you tell me why it is dangerous for characters to get out of bounds? You might have answered it, but I do not recall. I remember some. You should not go off limits because your characters might become stuck. You cannot play it anymore. So there are a number of reasons not to go into, you know, or why we try to prohibit people from going into out-of-bounds spaces. Some of it's just not developed landscape. You know, it's, you know, as artists and designers, we don't really want people in places that we haven't built yet, whether it's completely unbuilt or in progress spaces. You know, it doesn't feel good for us to see people running around in spaces that are, you know, unfinished, not to our standards, not to what we want from them, and then to see those players kind of, you know, setting their expectations based off of what they've seen in an area that they're not supposed to get into. You know, there are also issues where getting into spaces where you're not supposed to get into can result in your character getting stuck and having a hard time getting out of those spaces. It can result in potential interactions with gameplay and content that is not ready for public consumption, and that could cause damaging things to happen to your character depending on what that interaction is. You know, there are, you know, we have had instances of even just like effects accident that were supposed to be instance only effects escaping out into the world. You know, not because the players weren't supposed to be in those spaces, but because there were issues with those pieces of content in particular, and you know that's not great for, you know, that's just in general not great for the gameplay experience of that player. You can also trigger things that could cause issues with server performance. If it's a piece of content that has some logic issues that a player trips over, you know, in an unfinished space, that can, you know, degrade the experience beyond just what that player is experiencing. So, Soft Snake says, excluding the difference in time between LOTRO zones, is it possible to make a huge combination of all 4 regions into one huge Middle-earth map, even if you had all the resources in the world? Well, not with how we have built things. We could not make a map. Right now, make a map that big without cut points, without places that players would need to have to teleport. We try our best to line things up, but ultimately we need to have boundaries in the size of our landscape meshes in order to just help better manage data. So we have Eriador as Region 1, we have Rovanian as Region 2, we have Gondor for Region 3, Post-Pelennor for Region 4, and the new Haradwaith for Region 5, and then there's the Tales of Yore regions. And these all serve a purpose to kind of help manage load, manage movement for the space. I also think, the engine was built at a time where there was never the assumption that the game would get as physically big, landscape-wise, as it did. I was watching, I was watching a video on YouTube where it was, three friends that were going through and playing Lord of the Rings for the first time. They just kind of installed it on a whim, and they were just going to go play through it. And one of the things that they were constantly talking about, being really surprised about, is the open world nature. And while we within the regions we try to make things as open world as we can be, we do still have the limitations of a certain size for our height map. So Zeus asks about when more profession slots will be coming along, and like Druid Fire said in chat, best to ask about that in another chat, another stream. This is a world design focused stream, so if you have questions about what it takes to build a craft hall, physically build a craft hall, let me know. But I can't talk to you about things about when new craft slots will be coming in, or profession slots will be coming in. Green Tea asks, as you go around older Gondor and Gondor zones, are there any obvious changes you would make if you had a chance? Do you notice any designs that you would approach differently now? So, I know some people find it entertaining, some people may find it annoying, but we really do love our rocks. And running around these older regions where we haven't done an air quotes rock pass, I think is something that I wouldn't mind seeing done, because I think the rock pass just adds a jaggedness to a landscape that doesn't exist if we're just doing the cliffs purely as terrain. Because even though we have a texture on there that may look rough, it's still just smooth terrain. So I think that would be something that I would think about doing, is a rock pass. And maybe backporting the rock work that we did for King's Gondor, and backporting the landscape editions that we did for King's Gondor. But that is a pie in the sky, who has the time for that right now kind of thing. We're all super busy with everything that we're doing, and so it's hard to find time for those sorts of things. And there's always the question of what is the value add for going through and doing that sort of work. If we're anticipating swaths and swaths of new content being added to something like the original Gondor zones. Oh, I'm back. There we go. Back to me. The going in loops and not remembering where all the paths through are thing that I was talking about earlier. If we were anticipating, excuse me, major content revisions to Gondor, or the inclusion and addition of new content to original Gondor, then it might make sense to go back and do that work. But the value add is often not always there when we could be working on newer things. So this is another one of those going back, thinking about our Gondorian cities and how hard it is to really kind of wayfind your way through these places, because the walls are so tall that you don't have very many POIs that you can call out to and follow along with. You know, when you're down here, you know, you can see the tower here, and you can see, you know, some here and there, but overall, it's hard to see where you're going. And I think that's one of the biggest weaknesses of these cities is the navigation and wayfinding. You know, if we ever had an opportunity to go back and do some more work on that sort of thing, I think would really benefit these towns, especially since these towns and these cities are no longer endgame locations that players are going to be spending a considerable amount of time in and learning. I'll take a quick pause. Let me find a cool view, if I can find a cool view, and then I'll take a quick pause to answer a couple of questions that have shown up in the chat. This seems like a nice view with the dark sky and everything. Oh, there we go. That looks cooler. So Herok asks about the Cape of Umbar north side. Will it ever be in game? How the north and middle are inaccessible? That may be something that we can introduce as part of a content update at some point. But you know, if you're talking about the northern coastline of the original offering for Umbar, I think we planned, there's like a couple of camps up there and mixed spawns up at the peaks, but the cliff itself along the coast is pretty steep, from what I recall. If you're talking about like the shoreline up there, or if you're talking just about like further north along the coast, eventually there will be stuff that goes in there. There's just not immediate plans for that because we have other directions that we're going in and around Umbar. Lost Shire Hobbit says, have a drink. What are the drinks today? The drink today is ginger ale. I also have some seltzer water kicking over there. So if I get through the ginger ale, I'll go over and get the seltzer water. Hirak asks, will there ever be a Stable Master rework? I think making a distinct difference between hub travel, far travel, and near travel, Stable Masters, and having more swift to older regions. So yeah, stables are in a weird kind of spot right now where the way the old ones work, the old regions work, is kind of like mishmash. They're not entirely consistent with each other. And then the newer stuff, I've tried to establish a bit more consistency. I mean, I think it would be great if we could find a way to drastically improve how stable travel works and how our own internal pipeline for setting up routes is, and what the usage aspect of it is for players. I think would be great in general. I would love to be able to do things like combine the Stable Master collection panel with normal stable travel, because it feels like redundant UIs that could be combined to make something that's just generally more useful. But it's not something that is immediately on our radar right now. I was running around there in Pelargir, noticing the day file shift. It's like, oh, we're crossing over into new portions, new day files. I think this is meant to represent the battle that's being fought over there. Because what time of day is it? Yeah, it's the afternoon. So this is, I'm pretty sure, the red haze in the distance is meant to be a representation of the Battle of Pelennor Fields as we work our way towards there. This is another of the Gondorian towns that I think feels pretty good because of the landmarking stuff that I was talking about. You have the keep, which is the prominent focal point of the space. You do have the walls around the town, but they're not so high that they obstruct your view of other things around you. You have these crofter buildings as well, which, it's hard to believe a entire city would be crafted out of this heavy marble stonework, like every single building. So it's nice to have some variety in here where you do have some of that marble building work, but you also have the more simple stonework, the stone and wood crofters buildings. I think it does a good job of showing a more simple Gondorian village. And it's one of the things that I went into building all of the stuff in Onphalos and Penethgalen, kind of with that in mind, thinking like, okay, I want to be able to show off the imposing structures of Gondor, but I also want to make sure that we're building something that feels more livable for the common folk. I look at stuff like Pelargir and Dol Amroth, and it feels like there's a lot of royalty and noblage living there, but the buildings and structures don't feel like there would be a lot of common folk there. And then as you think about that, it's like, okay, well, where would the common folk live? But there's no structures around the cities to support the concept of common folk living there as well. Shouldn't Pelargir be as huge as Umbar, since both cities are considered twins? I think Pelargir was built at the right size for what it needed to be at the time that we needed to build it. And I think that Umbar is kind of the right size for what it needs to be for us as well. I think Umbar Baharbel is certainly, it is a large city, but it is a large city that we will get much use out of over the next several updates, and it is intended to be kind of the next major social center that we can use as the foundation for our storytelling. Because we had Dol Amroth, and then we had Pelargir, we have Minas Tirith, and those are all places where the story takes the players there, and then the players kind of live there, air quotes, for a while. And I think that's our intention with Umbar Baharbel as well. It's also it's a different kind of city experience too. So whereas I made a post on the message boards about this, where someone was talking about why I think it was like, why is Umbar not as grand or something like that? And I think they serve very different purposes, both for us narratively and for our goals and objectives with building these regions. I think Umbar succeeds in it provides a city that feels like a living city, whereas I think we didn't quite hit that level of success with things like Minas Tirith or Pelargir or Linhir, Dol Amroth. Like those felt like monuments. And I think Umbar Baharbel feels like a city with monuments in it, if that makes sense. Let's see. Some stretchy terrain textures there. We'll just ignore those for right now. This is another town that I always, whenever I've run in here, Tumladen has always been confusing to me. Tumladen and the other one that we'll hopefully have time to pop into. I'll go over a little bit since we had a delay to start, but where it's just sprawly, without much sense of guidance through it. Like if there are districts, they could use a little bit more like landmarking to really like, and I mean actual like billboard landmarks, not structures, because I think structurally Tomb Laden does all right with the landmarking. Building out this valley here in King's Gondor was a lot of fun. Herok says, about going south, since lore is dry there, are you guys planning on more Numenorian cities or going full Harad from now on? I think there will probably be a mix of both, depending on what the locations we're going to need. I think Umbar was a great opportunity for us to explore cultures that we haven't explored much of beyond kind of treating them as like mustache twirling evil. So I think seeing Umbar as a sympathetic peoples, that the people living there are not all villains, and the ones that were villains might have been more villainy due to their living situation more so than anything. Let's see. Lashire Helmet says, I have to admit, despite the Dawnless Day skybox, the sunsets can still be really impressive. I think that's something we've been very successful at, is making some very striking vistas. Again, it's like the broad strokes of painting the picture that gives you the sense of the world. All right. Will we get ports between the Gondor cities? I'm not quite sure if they are already there. I missed them. So you could get from Dol Amroth to new and old versions, just like we can switch timelines in North. So right now there is a boat network in King's Gondor that connects the Harland, Pelargir, Dol Amroth, and Lon Kirion. So that network, that boat network, can take you through all those. They're not currently switch points between the current, or the King's Gondor version and the original versions of any of those. It's not something that was a high priority for us to implement. It's something that we could consider implementing in the future, but it's not something that is, immediately on our plates. All right, here we are finally in the last area, Los Arnak. I don't know, like maybe just in like talking about all of these different cities that we've been running through, like maybe I just prefer the more rustic Gondor cities over the very, very heavy walled ones, because like the ones that we've been running through here feel like less oppressive to me. Like we talk a lot about play fatigue, going through dark spaces like Moria or Angmar and how fatiguing that can be. And I think a little bit of me is feeling like big imposing city fatigue as we go through all of these. So coming into places like this, coming into Arnak is like a nice little like breath of fresh air in comparison. Hirok says the Isle of Storms, a 3-man instance, which is available on Bullroar right now, I believe. Looks awesome. Has it been planned to have that island and the surrounding ones be on the map? Also, why do instances have no discovery points or portal? Why do the instances have no discovery points or portals you can enter? So the Isle of Storms is just an island off the coast. We could probably update the map to include the island there, but I think at least with that one, it's kind of justified that you'd have to get in a boat and row there to discover it, so it makes sense to not have a discovery point for that. As far as the raid does have a physical entrance to it. Whether or not access is being gated behind discovery, that is a question for the game systems team to address, less so than for me. I do like the idea of having to go to a place first in order to get access to it again in the future, but it really depends on what the designer's goals are for those instances, and sometimes it may make sense for them to not require discovery. I know we also had some issues with certain instances that had discovery, that aspect of the instance had to be turned off. The discovery requirement had to be turned off because of issues with some stuff. So kind of what we're seeing here, if you can see as I walk around, you can see the terrain kind of blink. It goes dark and then light again. And of course now it's not going to do it now that I'm talking about it. There we go. So this is usually what happens. Excuse me. This is usually what happens when there are too many lights influencing the landscape. It gets cranky. It starts deciding, well, you put so many lights on me, I'm just going to turn them all off. So we'll make our way up. Yeah, it's like maybe part of this too is, I've been playing other games that have done cities very effectively, and some where it's like between the landmarking and just the general layout of the cities, well, you may not be able to go in a straight line everywhere that you want to go. You can kind of navigate in a mostly straight line. And I think in these instances, it's really hard to have that kind of navigation, which makes it even harder to kind of know where you need to go. Even if we built the city as a big loop, it's still a little tricky to sort out where you need to go at all times. I remember the first time I walked through this area and just kind of being thrown off at how parky it felt. I think walking in here, I was initially expecting it to be another city, and then it was just there was a little bit of city, but most of the rest of it was all just this kind of glade. Which kind of surprised me. It wasn't what I was expecting to run across as I was entering in here. And it's always nice to be able to walk into an area and get hit with something that was contrary to what your expectations for the area were. That poor deer is probably panicked because there's no way for it to get out. Alright, let's see if I can get us through the rest of Gondor up to the Harland before time is up. And the Harland is a good stopping point, because what we'll do is we'll pick up in Ithilien once we get to the Harland. The Harland will be kind of our stopping point, with the understanding that at least as far as the content flow for this region goes, you kind of go up through the Harland and then back down to Pelargir, and then someone in Pelargir tells you to go hop on a boat and cross the river, which takes you to Ithilien. So that will be our kind of flow for this. I think for most of the remainder of the streams, I'm gonna try to go in play order of the regions, and eventually we're gonna run out of regions, and we'll have to figure something else out. And we see some more ruins in the future. This was all. It was interesting as we were working on King's Gondor. We had a spreadsheet full of all the different POIs and locations, and had to talk about. It's like, okay, so now that we're here, or now that we're like reimagining this area, this used to be burning ruins. What do we make it now? Like, what do we do? Do we let nature reclaim it, or do we have bandits moving in? So like, for example, this one here, the orcs are gone, and now in its place are all, like, I think they're goats here. It's like a goat camp because it's like the bushes have grown in and flowers have come in, and so it was interesting kind of having that back and forth, because I think there was some, like, the easy thing would have been to kind of keep things most of the same, but we did want to try to show a change in time and a change in the world. So let's see. I also need to fit in Dead Marsh's Casual Stroll. That would not be a very long casual stroll. It's like, up and reeds, and up more reeds, and now I've run into more reeds, and here's some water, and more reeds. Let's see. I don't know if this is possible, but I'd be interested in seeing the various assets already in game, but in the builder, to see how you adjust stuff after the big render is done. If that would reveal too much stuff. One of the things that I've talked with Cordovan about is a development stream. I know the one that Bob Hess did for DDO was very popular, but I think it's a lot harder to do that sort of stream when it comes to building landscape, especially because, like, I think our own working, like, everyone's working methods vary and are different, and I don't know how thrilling it would be to see me just, like, fiddle with points on landscape for an hour, if that makes sense. Not to say that we couldn't come up with a format for that sort of thing and really show how how something like this comes together, but I think if we were to do that, it would need to be a very, like, specific and tactical effort. Like, we would need to look very closely and specifically at, we're gonna build this thing, build this project as part of this this stream or this series, whatever it would end up being, and so that would require a very, like, specific concerted effort. So yeah, here we are at the Harland. All sorts of ruins everywhere. Burning ships. Lots of orcs. So Soft Snake GR, I would have to take a look at the actual physical landscape and kind of do my research on those spaces to see what makes sense, if it makes sense to try to do them all at once. So I fibbed a little bit. We'll go out into Pelennor just a little bit, at least as far as it will let me, because I don't think it'll let me go all the way to Minas Tirith. Or maybe I'm thinking of the wrong version. This version might block me. We'll see. No, this version doesn't block me. Okay, so we'll make our way to Minas Tirith while I answer a few more questions. So here we have like talking about how this is very much a monument city when you have the pier right there. Like this city is showing off. It's meant to show off, right? Like. So Lotrotest asks, what about instanced PvP/arenas? That's something that is not really something I can answer a question on. I know Orion has expressed an interest in doing something like that, but it's a matter of time, technology, and availability to really do the investigations. But yeah, very, very impressive as a POI. Minas Tirith does a great job of being a large, imposing, impressive city. A bit of a bear to navigate, I will admit to that, but it definitely really shows off well. And there's a reason why it's part of the character select screen. So yeah, how about I get to the front gate and then I'll see what there are for remaining questions, and then we'll wrap things up. Like I said, the next stream I'll focus on Ithilien, and we'll kind of work our way around through Ithilien, and then through Osgiliath, and then we'll be here. Probably the stream after that will be focused on the many versions of Minas Tirith, so we can take a look at the different versions of Minas Tirith through the Battles of Pelennor Fields, as well as the Battles of Pelennor Fields, as well as Midsummer, and just kind of compare and contrast all the differences there. So yeah, here we are at the gates of Minas Tirith, and we look out to the west, or to the east, and there's poor Osgiliath there in the distance. All right, let's see if there are any more questions, and if not, we'll get things wrapped up. Druid's Fire says, hypothetical, if you had a clone to do work for you, because we know how everyone is so crushed for time, what older, already playable zone or town would you want to tweak the most, because you've learned so much since the time that it was built? I would say Thorin's Hall and Calendim, and probably Dweland as well. I think those three areas are very, they feel very just kind of slammed together. Like we had these assets, they're kind of weird shapes. What do we do with them? How do we build with them? And I think we've had a lot more experience over the years, and that I think we could do more interesting things with both of those areas now compared to what we built at the start. So I think that's where like if Clone Me needed some like ramp up time, I would put Clone Me on kind of looking at those locations